No breakthroughs, no key agreements, and no end to the fighting after the first talks since the invasion began between the top diplomats from Russia and Ukraine.
We also raised the issue of a ceasefire, 24-hour ceasefire, to resolve the most pressing humanitarian issues. We did not make progress on this.
That is Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba speaking this morning following the talks. In Ukrainian, he made a point of telling reporters there was no surrender from Ukraine. We're going to have much more on the negotiations brokered by Turkey in just a moment with a report from London. But we can tell you that a key issue was relief for the besieged city of Mariupol. And this is video into us just this hour that shows another attempt to get aid into that key port city. As we have been reporting, local officials say the humanitarian crisis there is worsening by the day. Russian forces keep up an unrelenting bombardment. There are hundreds of thousands of people there trying to get out, and Ukrainian officials are again trying to take those people out, people trapped by the fighting, and to get supplies in at the same time. But as far as the humanitarian evacuation, Ukraine says there are, in fact, 6 more evacuation routes open again this morning, and they cover 10 different locations. You see them there on the map, many of them in the western suburbs of Kyiv. They are routes to safety away from the Russian forces who are attempting to surround the Ukrainian capital. It is day 15 of Russia's war on Ukraine. And the co-host of The National, Adrienne Arsenault, has been offering just extraordinary reporting of the conflict and of the people and what they're living through. She's in Lviv, Ukraine, and live with us this morning. Adrienne, as I was mentioning, some discussion with David Cochrane in a moment of some of the broad strokes of that diplomatic meeting. But as I was saying, one of the key points between Ukraine and Russia was the humanitarian crisis. Let's talk a little bit about that particular issue. How far did they get on humanitarian corridors and getting civilians to safety?
Not far enough. Certainly not as far as definitely not as far as they need to, both in getting supplies in and getting people out. So, you know, when you want to establish a humanitarian corridor or even a brief ceasefire, it's so complicated, Heather. You have to agree in principle. The message has to go to both sides that this is the route that will be taken. These are the hours in which it will be passable. This is what's going in. This is where you do not hit. Those details make the difference between a road being shelled with people on it or not being shelled. They didn't even get past the principal point of it. So this is an enormous problem. I mean, you know, you saw the pictures of the mass graves being dug yesterday. Well, they're doing that really because it's the only safe thing they could do. Yeah, the ground is absolutely frozen, but they don't have time to sort of dig dignified graves for each person, because the shelling is so persistent. And what has really frustrated and really sickened a lot of people in Ukraine is to hear the comments that, no, a hospital wasn't bombed. That's fake news. That toxic phrase that keeps being used here, the suggestion from Sergei Lavrov that it was, the hospital wasn't a hospital, it was being used as a mustering point for Ukrainian soldiers, and that's why it was hit. He went on to say, no, there was no invasion of Ukraine. They certainly don't intend to invade other countries. And no, Russia doesn't want nuclear engagement. Nothing in those words offers anything close to comfort for anyone in Ukraine. You can maybe look at that meeting and say, aha, okay, the meetings are getting to be a higher level, but they're not actually accomplishing anything. What Russia has asked for is nothing short of complete, I think as the Ukrainians are suggesting, that a complete surrender from Ukraine, and certainly the mood in this country is that, no.
You know, as you've been reporting, interesting, the mayor of the capital, of Kyiv, Mayor Klitschko, has been talking, saying that half of the population of the capital has fled, Adrienne, anticipating what is coming. Russian forces advancing on the capital. So half of them have fled already on this day 15. I'm wondering, for those who are staying, what are people facing in the next couple of days in the capital and elsewhere generally?
Well, there's a terrible pattern when people flee any kind of disaster or war, which is that the ones who have the means and the health and the strength are the first ones out, right? They're the ones who have the capability to get out fast. And the more time goes on, Heather, the more vulnerable the people who are leaving. So already we have started to see some people who are very elderly, who are really struggling to make the journey, some people with disabilities, some people who initially stayed because they're like, I can't, I don't have the means to go, but now they're like, oh no, I have to go. So every day that goes on, you're seeing people who are more in trouble. In Mariupol, for example, there's no heat at all. We are in the middle of a really serious Arctic blast here. It's uncomfortable for people here. It is deadly for people in Mariupol. There's no water. So they are drinking the snow that is on the rooftops. People don't want to go outside. They're certainly not going to light a fire to cook because they're terrified of the persistent shelling. So they're staying in these crawl spaces. It's a disaster.
Adrian, so many of the people were looking at pictures of Mariupol there. Again, as Adrian says, Sergei Lavrov said it was not a maternity and children's hospital, but one child is among the 3 dead in that attack. People fleeing, Adrian, so many of them are going to where you are in the West, Lviv. And as you talk to people there, what are some of the stories that you're hearing now most recently? What are you noticing as time goes on and you continue to cover this story?
Well, again, Heather, it is a lot of the older people we're starting to see now. I've had a couple conversations with some women who survived the Second World War. One woman told me that she remembers German soldiers grabbing her by the hair and shoving her in like a root cellar. And she was so upset. She said not even they did what is happening now. From her perspective, she grew up like 6 blocks away, 6 bus stops away from where she has been living, but she says it's ruined, it's over, there's nothing to go back to. So you're hearing these deeply shocked stories. You're seeing these 1,000-yard stares when people stop for a moment, Heather, and they get a little bit of food in them and they start thinking about everything they've gone through. That's when you see trauma and the stone face of trauma that is always sort of terrifying to see. People are not stopping for very long at all. You're not seeing sort of tent cities here. It's just like go, go, go. When we do the show at night in Lviv, and we have to do it from a balcony because the curfew's on, you can't go out onto the streets, you hear nothing except this train, the constant train that goes all night long, that is evacuating people from the east through the west, sometimes right to Poland. It is the only sound, is the squeal of that train. And people are terrified. You know, this city looks completely fine right now, but everyone keeps saying to us, that's what it felt like in Kyiv. We thought we were okay too. So they walk around here with a different sense of what is coming. And every time we come out, more neighborhoods are barricaded, more people are planning. We're about to meet some young people who aren't in school. What are they doing? They are preparing 3D printers of missile stabilizers. Everybody is working on the war effort. Because they're passionate and they're terrified.
We've seen Molotov cocktails, camouflage nets, and now this on the 3D printer. Adrian, looking forward to that report tonight or in the nights to come, and really appreciate your time with us this morning. The co-host of The National, Adrian Arsenault, who will be again broadcasting this evening from Lviv, Ukraine.